The first wolf stepped through the gate. No one screamed. No one moved. Even the icy wind that had howled across the northern mountains seemed to lose its voice. The creature stood taller than any alpha in the kingdom. Its silver fur shimmered beneath the pale moonlight, marked by countless scars that looked less like wounds and more like memories carved by centuries. Its amber eyes swept across the gathered crowd, not with anger, not with hunger, but with quiet judgment. The royal guards tightened their grip on their spears. Archers pulled back their bowstrings. The Alpha King slowly reached for the sword at his side. Yet the ancient wolf ignored them all. It walked past the strongest warriors in Moonfall Dominion, past the frightened nobles, past the trembling council, until it stopped before the smallest person standing on the frozen mountain. A young Omega. Her cloak was torn. Snow clung to her boots. Her hands still trembled from touching the forbidden stone gate. Everyone knew her, not because she was important, but because she was the girl nobody ever chose. The wolf lowered its massive head. Then it knelt. A deep, respectful silence spread across the mountain. Another wolf emerged from the darkness beyond the gate. Then another, and another. 20 enormous wolves stepped into the moonlight, each more ancient than the last. None growled. None attacked. Instead, every single one bowed before the rejected Omega. The oldest among them lifted his scarred face toward the horrified royal family. His voice echoed across the cliffs like distant thunder. "We have waited 700 winters. For her!" Fear swept through the crowd. Some dropped to their knees. Others fled. The council stared as if the world itself had broken, because the gate they had spent centuries guarding was never meant to keep monsters inside. It had been protecting a promise, and somehow, the weakest Omega in the kingdom had just fulfilled it. Long before sunrise painted the snowy peaks with silver light, Lyra Ashvale was already awake. The castle infirmary never truly slept. Warriors returned from midnight patrols with frozen hands, hunters staggered in carrying claw wounds, and messenger wolves often limped through the heavy wooden doors before dawn. While healers of noble blood accepted only important patients, Lyra never asked who deserved help. She simply helped whoever stood before her. The old healer, Mistress Eloan, watched from across the room as Lyra carefully stitched the torn paw of a gray patrol wolf. "You speak to them," Eloan murmured with a faint smile. Lyra looked up. "I don't think they understand." "They do." The wolf rested its head against Lyra's shoulder as if proving the old woman's point. Lyra smiled softly. "They're only frightened." "Exactly." Outside, bells echoed through the castle courtyard. Moonbinding Day had begun, the most celebrated festival in Moonfall Dominion. The day young alphas publicly chose future mates, alliances were announced, and families celebrated new beginnings beneath the blessing of the moon. For almost everyone, not for Omegas like Lyra, she washed her hands quietly before slipping into the courtyard, carrying a basket of fresh herbs. The celebration had already transformed the castle into something beautiful. Blue banners danced between stone towers. Lanterns glowed despite the daylight, and children chased one another across snow-covered paths while musicians played ancient melodies beside roaring braziers. Laughter seemed to exist everywhere, except around her. Conversations softened whenever she walked past. Not cruel enough to wound openly, not kind enough to welcome her, just invisible. That hurt more. Near the center of the courtyard, several noble daughters admired embroidered cloaks while waiting for the ceremony. One noticed Lyra. "Careful!" she whispered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "If she stands too close, people might think she actually belongs here." Soft laughter followed. Lyra lowered her eyes. She had learned years ago that silence usually ended humiliation faster than arguments ever could. She kept walking. Near the palace stairs stood King Kaeldraken. Tall, still, watching everything. Unlike many rulers, Kael rarely smiled during public ceremonies. His attention moved across the crowd like someone measuring more than appearances. For a brief moment, his eyes settled on Lyra. She expected the familiar expression. Pity, disappointment, dismissal. Instead, there was only quiet observation. Nothing more, nothing less. Then another noble approached him, breaking the moment. Lyra disappeared into the crowd once again. The ceremony began beneath the ancient moon pillar. One by one, Young Alpha stepped forward to announce mates and political alliances. Cheers followed every declaration. When the Master of Ceremonies finally called for unattached Omegas to present themselves, only a handful walked forward. Lyra joined them reluctantly. Silence spread. One Alpha after another looked past her. Names were called. Hands were offered. Promises exchanged. Eventually, everyone had been chosen. Except her. The Master hesitated before clearing his throat. It appears the remaining Omega may return. No cruelty filled his voice. Only routine. As though her rejection had been expected all along. A few sympathetic faces looked away. Others simply resumed celebrating. Lyra bowed politely before leaving the gathering without a word. Behind the castle walls, she finally allowed herself to breathe. The cold air stung her lungs. She wasn't surprised anymore. That frightened her most. She had become accustomed to being forgotten. A soft whimper interrupted her thoughts. Near the stable fence, a tiny white wolf pup struggled beneath a collapsed wooden cart. One hind leg was trapped beneath the broken wheel. Lyra hurried forward. There you are. The frightened pup bared tiny teeth, more terrified than threatening. It's all right. She didn't reach immediately. She waited, spoke gently, allowed the animal to decide. After several long moments, the pup crawled toward her on its own. Lyra carefully lifted the broken beam, wrapped the injured leg with strips torn from her own sleeve, and carried the pup inside her cloak to keep it warm. A stable worker approached. You shouldn't waste medicine on strays. Lyra looked down at the trembling pup. It was never medicine that was wasted. The man frowned but said nothing. By evening, snow had begun falling again. The little wolf refused to leave her side, even after its leg was treated, even after food was offered elsewhere. Mistress Aloan watched the strange bond quietly. They always choose you first. Lyra laughed softly. People don't. The old healer's smile faded. Perhaps people simply haven't learned what wolves already know. Before Lyra could answer, the infirmary doors burst open. A young scout stumbled inside, covered in frost. There's been a rock slide near the northern cliffs. What happened? Aloan asked. A hunting pack found something. What? The scout swallowed hard. A mountain sealed by black stone. The elders ordered everyone away. They said. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. It's the forbidden gate. The room fell silent. Even the little white pup suddenly lifted its ears toward the north, as though it had been waiting to hear those words. Outside, far beyond the castle lights, hidden beneath centuries of snow, something ancient quietly awakened. As Lyra looked toward the distant northern mountains, she couldn't explain why her heart suddenly raced. She had never seen the forbidden gate. She didn't even know exactly where it was. Yet for the first time in her life, it felt as though something in the darkness already knew her name. The mountain did not call with a voice. It called with silence. For 3 nights after the scout's warning, Lyra found herself waking before dawn, her heart pounding for no reason she could explain. Every dream ended the same way. A towering black gate buried beneath snow, glowing with pale silver light while 20 pairs of golden eyes watched from the darkness beyond. She never saw their faces, only their eyes, waiting. On the 4th morning, Mistress Aloan noticed the shadows beneath Lyra's eyes. You haven't slept. Lyra forced a smile. I'm fine. The old healer studied her for a long moment. No. She reached beneath her cloak and placed a small leather pouch into Lyra's hands. Inside were dried mountain herbs. Go gather frostroot from the northern cliffs. We are running low. Lyra blinked. The northern cliffs. The safest paths remain open. Aloan's expression softened. And perhaps the mountain is calling someone who has spent too long ignoring herself. Lyra frowned, unsure what the old woman meant. Yet before the sun fully rose, she found herself climbing the winding trail toward the northern range, the little white wolf pup trotting faithfully beside her. The higher they climbed, the quieter the world became. The cheerful sounds of Moonfall Dominion faded behind them. No birds sang. No wind whispered through the frozen pines. Even the snow seemed to absorb every sound. The pup suddenly stopped. Its ears stood straight. A frightened whine escaped its throat. What is it? Instead of moving forward, the pup gently nudged Lyra's leg, then looked toward a narrow trail hidden between 2 cliffs. It wasn't the path marked on her map. It was older, almost forgotten. Something urged her to follow. The hidden trail twisted through ancient stone until the air itself felt different. The cold grew strangely gentle, like winter no longer wished to harm her. Then, she saw it. Half buried beneath centuries of ice stood an enormous gate carved from black stone. It stretched nearly 50 feet high. Ancient runes covered every inch of its surface, glowing faintly beneath layers of frost. Massive claw marks crossed the stone as though creatures larger than houses had once guarded it. The stories had not exaggerated. The forbidden gate truly existed. Lyra stood frozen. It's beautiful. Not terrifying. Not evil. Lonely. For reasons she couldn't explain, sadness settled over her heart. She stepped closer. The little wolf pup whimpered desperately, tugging at her cloak as if asking her to stop. Then another sound echoed across the mountain. A cry. Weak. Painful. Lyra turned. A full-grown gray wolf lay trapped beneath fallen ice, several yards away. Blood stained the snow around its hind leg. Without hesitation, Lyra ran toward it. Easy. The wolf growled weakly. I know. She carefully pushed against the heavy ice. Nothing. Too heavy. She tried again. Her shoulders burned. Her hands bled against the frozen stone. Still she pushed. Finally, the slab shifted just enough. The wolf pulled free. It staggered several steps before collapsing again. Lyra tore strips from her cloak and wrapped the wounded leg. There. You'll heal. The gray wolf looked into her eyes. Instead of fleeing, it gently pressed its forehead against her hand. A deep vibration rolled beneath the mountain. The ground trembled. Lyra slowly turned. The runes covering the forbidden gate had begun glowing. Not red, not violent. Silver. Bright. Alive. No, she whispered. I didn't. The mountain answered with another rumble. The wolf beside her stood. The white pup stood. Both stared toward the gate. Not with fear, with anticipation. Far below the mountain, royal scouts saw the light first. One rider shouted toward the others. The gate! It's awakening! Within minutes, warning horns echoed throughout Moonfall Dominion. Castle bells rang without pause. Warriors grabbed weapons. Nobles abandoned meetings. The royal council rushed toward the northern cliffs. King Kale mounted his black wolf without asking questions. There had been only one law regarding the Forbidden Gate for 700 years. If it ever opened, nothing beyond it could be allowed to leave. Back on the mountain, the silver light spread across every ancient rune. Lyra backed away. I didn't do anything. A soft voice answered. Exactly. She spun around. No one stood there. Only snow. Only silence. Then she realized the voice had come from beyond the gate. A long crack echoed across the valley. The enormous stone doors slowly began separating, centimeter by centimeter. The sound was unlike stone grinding against stone. It sounded like someone taking their first breath after centuries. Cold mist poured through the opening. Not dark. Silver. The air filled with floating flakes that shimmered like moonlight. The little white pup quietly walked forward. It sat before the opening, waiting. Lyra's pulse thundered. Every instinct told her to run. Instead, she stayed, because something behind that gate didn't feel dangerous. It felt alone. The opening widened. Darkness waited beyond. Then two enormous golden eyes appeared, watching. Calm, ancient. The silhouette stepped forward. Each paw landed with impossible grace despite its enormous size. An ancient wolf emerged into the moonlight. Its silver fur carried scars older than kingdoms. Its shoulders stood nearly level with Lyra's head. Its amber eyes held neither rage nor hunger, only recognition. Far below, hundreds of soldiers reached the final ridge. Archers raised their bows. Hold! Shouted Captain Torin. King Kale arrived moments later, his gaze locking onto the impossible sight before him. No! One elder whispered. They're real. The ancient wolf ignored every weapon pointed toward it. Ignored the king. Ignored the council. Ignored the trembling warriors. It walked directly toward Lyra. Every heartbeat felt endless. When it finally stopped before her, the mountain became completely silent. Then, the enormous wolf slowly lowered its head and knelt. A collective gasp swept across the mountainside. Before anyone could react, Another wolf stepped through the gate. Then another. Then another. One after another. 20 colossal wolves emerged from the ancient darkness. Black, white, silver, gray. Each carried centuries upon its body. Each radiated quiet power. None showed aggression. Instead, every single one walked past the kingdom's greatest warriors, until they formed a perfect circle around the weakest Omega. One by one, they bowed. The oldest among them finally lifted his scarred face toward the horrified kingdom. His deep voice rolled through the frozen valley like distant thunder. "We have waited." His golden eyes returned to Lyra. 700 winters. For the child whose heart remembered what the kingdom forgot. No one dared breathe, not even the wind. As terror spread through the royal ranks, Lady Selene stepped forward and shouted the order every soldier had feared, and every ancient wolf had expected. "Kill them all!" King Kale's hand tightened around the hilt of his sword, but before a single warrior could move, the oldest wolf slowly turned his head toward the Alpha King. Then, for the first time in 7 centuries, he spoke the king's true family name, a name that had been erased from history. "Draken, do you know what your ancestors stole?" No one moved. Lady Selene's command still hung in the freezing air. "Kill them all!" Hundreds of archers held their breath, arrows drawn to their cheeks. One careless movement, one frightened heartbeat, and the mountain would become a battlefield. But the 20 ancient wolves never lowered themselves into attack. They simply stood around Lyra, silent, protective, watching. King Kale slowly raised one hand. "Hold!" The command carried the weight of absolute authority. The soldiers hesitated. Selene turned sharply toward him. "Your Majesty, those creatures are the reason the Forbidden Gate existed." Kale never looked away from the wolves. "You sound very certain." "I know our history." "Do you?" The single question struck harder than an accusation. Before Selene could answer, the oldest wolf stepped forward. His silver coat rippled in the mountain wind. His amber eyes rested on Kale. "You carry the face of your grandfather." Kale's expression tightened. "My grandfather died before I was born." "We know." The wolf's voice carried neither anger nor kindness. "We buried him." A murmur spread through the gathered nobles. "Impossible. No wolf could know that." Kale's fingers loosened from the hilt of his sword. "Who are you?" The wolf bowed his head slightly. "I was once called Vargos." The name hit the elders like lightning. One elderly historian stumbled backward. "No, it cannot be." Torin glanced toward him. "You know that name?" The old man's lips trembled. "Vargos was—" He swallowed. "The first guardian." Silence answered him. Every child in Moonfall Dominion had heard bedtime stories about the guardian wolves. According to history, they had betrayed humanity 700 years ago, slaughtered thousands, and were sealed behind the Forbidden Gate before they could destroy the kingdom. Yet the creature standing before them looked nothing like the monster described in old tales. His eyes held grief, not hatred. Lyra finally found her voice. "Why did you kneel?" 20 pairs of golden eyes turned toward her. Vargo smiled, a quiet, tired smile that carried centuries of sorrow. "Because promises should always be honored." "I don't understand." "You will." Before he could continue, Selene stepped between them. "Enough!" She pointed toward Lyra. "She has already been influenced." Her voice rang across the mountainside. "Seize the Omega!" Several guards instinctively stepped forward. The 20 wolves moved at the same time. Not aggressively, simply one step. The snow beneath their paws cracked. An invisible pressure rolled across the mountain. Every horse reared. Every trained wolf lowered its body. Even experienced warriors instinctively stepped backward. Torin blinked in disbelief. "They didn't threaten us. They warned us." Kale noticed the difference immediately. Not one ancient wolf had bared its teeth. Not one growled. Their restraint frightened him more than violence would have. Creatures capable of destroying everyone present were choosing peace. The journey back to the capital felt unreal. The 20 wolves followed at a respectful distance behind Lyra. Never too close, never too far. Like guardians escorting someone precious, villagers gathered along the roads as word spread faster than the winter wind. Doors opened. Children pointed. Old women whispered prayers. Men removed their hats in stunned silence. "They're following an Omega." "I thought guardian wolves were monsters." They don't look like monsters. No, they look sad. The whispers followed them all the way to the castle. Inside the royal hall, panic had already taken root. Council members argued over one another. They must be destroyed. They crossed the gate. The kingdom will fall. Others were less certain. They haven't harmed anyone. Not yet. Celine slammed both hands onto the council table. The longer they remain alive, the greater the danger. Cale remained standing near the great window overlooking the snowy courtyard. Outside, the 20 wolves rested peacefully beneath ancient pine trees. Children watched them from behind their parents. None of the wolves moved. None even glanced toward the castle. As though they had all the patience in the world, Cale finally spoke. What exactly do we know about them? The room fell silent. Celine answered immediately. They betrayed humanity. According to whom? Our records. Cale turned. Records written by whom? No one answered. He continued calmly. How many people in this room have actually seen the original chronicles? Again, silence. The royal historian cleared his throat nervously. The originals disappeared generations ago. When? No one knows. Cale's gaze hardened. So our entire understanding of 700 years of history depends on copies, whose authors are unknown. The realization settled over the chamber like fresh snow. Meanwhile, Lyra sat quietly in the castle gardens. The little white pup slept against her side. Vargos rested several feet away beneath an ancient oak tree. Neither spoke for a long while. Finally, Lyra whispered, Everyone fears you. They fear stories. Were they true? Vargos looked toward the moon rising above the castle walls. What do you think? She considered the question. You could have attacked today. We could have. You didn't. No. Why? The old wolf closed his eyes. Because your ancestors once taught us that strength exists to protect the frightened, not become what they fear. Lyra frowned. My ancestors? Vargos opened his eyes. Tell me, child, what do you know about your family? She looked down. Very little. My parents died when I was young. I don't remember them. I was told they were ordinary healers. Vargos's expression filled with quiet sorrow. No, they were extraordinary. Before Lyra could ask another question, a sharp whistle echoed through the gardens. An arrow buried itself in the ground between them. A second arrow followed, then a third. Hidden assassins. Vargos was already moving. Not toward the attackers. Toward Lyra. His massive body shielded her before the fourth arrow could reach its target. The shaft shattered harmlessly against his shoulder. He didn't even flinch. Castle guards rushed into the gardens. The assassins disappeared into the darkness before anyone could catch them. Torin examined one of the broken arrows. His face darkened. There are no markings. Cale arrived moments later. What happened? Torin held up the arrowhead. This wasn't meant for the wolf. Cale slowly looked toward Lyra. Someone had just tried to kill the weakest Omega in the kingdom. Not because she was powerless, because someone feared what she might learn. That same night, unable to ignore his doubts any longer, Cale descended alone into the castle's oldest archives. Dust-covered shelves untouched for decades. Most scrolls repeated the same official history. Guardian wolves, traitors, the Forbidden Gate, punishment. Yet something caught his eye. Behind a loose stone in the wall rested a weathered leather journal. It bore the royal seal of his great-grandfather. Hands trembling slightly, Cale opened the first page. The ink had faded, but one sentence remained clear enough to read. If anyone finds this, forgive us. We did not imprison monsters. We imprisoned the only ones who remained loyal. Cale stared at the words. His heartbeat echoed through the silent chamber. Everything he believed about his kingdom, everything he had sworn to protect, suddenly felt like it had been built upon a lie. As Cale turned to the next page, he discovered that several sheets had been violently torn from the journal decades ago. Only one fragment remained. Scrawled across the bottom, in hurried handwriting, were 7 chilling words. Seek the first queen beneath the frozen sanctuary. At that exact moment, far above the archives, Lady Celine quietly ordered her most trusted followers. Burn every remaining record before dawn. The castle had never felt so quiet, not because people had stopped talking, because everyone had started whispering. Servants lowered their voices whenever Lyra passed. Guards glanced toward the snowy courtyard before speaking, as if expecting 20 ancient wolves to appear beside her at any moment. Children peeked through windows to catch another glimpse of the silent giants resting beneath the pine trees. The wolves never wandered, never hunted livestock, never threatened anyone. Every morning, they simply sat facing the eastern mountains as the first light touched the snow, like old soldiers keeping a promise no one else remembered. The people noticed. Fear did not disappear, but certainty did. Before sunrise, Cale returned to the hidden archive. The torn journal lay open on the table, exactly where he had left it. The words still echoed in his mind. We did not imprison monsters. He read the remaining pages again, searching for anything connected to the frozen sanctuary. Nothing. Whoever had removed the missing pages had done so carefully, not to destroy the journal, only to erase the truth. A quiet voice broke the silence. Your Majesty. Torrin stepped into the chamber. You've been here all night. Cale closed the journal. Tell me something honestly. Torrin nodded. When you saw the guardian wolves, did they look like monsters? The captain answered without hesitation. No. They looked like warriors. Cale studied him. You changed your mind, quickly. Torrin shook his head. No. I changed it when one of them shielded Lady Lyra instead of attacking us. He paused. I've seen fear. I've seen bloodlust. Yesterday wasn't either. Cale slowly nodded. Prepare 6 riders. Torrin frowned. For war? No. For answers. Across the castle grounds, Lyra knelt beside one of the oldest wolves. Unlike Vargo's, this wolf's fur was nearly white. One cloudy, I suggested countless battles long forgotten. Yet his movements were gentle. She carefully brushed melting snow from an old scar buried beneath thick fur. You've carried this a long time. The wolf closed his eye, not in pain, in trust. Nearby, several children watched nervously from behind a stone fountain. One little girl finally gathered enough courage to step closer. Does? She swallowed. Does he bite? Lyra smiled. Only if someone deserves it. The old wolf gave an exaggerated snort. The children giggled. Slowly, one child after another approached. Not Lyra, the wolf. Within minutes, enormous paws rested carefully beside tiny boots while children scratched thick silver fur. The adults stared in disbelief. Predators feared across centuries, patiently allowing children to climb onto their backs. An old farmer whispered, My grandfather always said monsters hate laughter. Another replied, Then perhaps they were never monsters. By midday, Cale, Torrin, Lyra, and Vargos began climbing toward the northern mountains once again. The remaining wolves followed from a distance. No one questioned why. It simply felt right. The journey lasted hours. Snow fell softly around them, covering old tracks almost as quickly as they appeared. Finally, Vargo stopped before a cliff completely hidden beneath ice. There. Cale frowned. There is nothing. There was. Vargos gently touched the frozen wall with one enormous paw. The mountain remembers. Lyra stepped closer. Her fingertips brushed the ice. Immediately, silver light spread beneath the frozen surface. Ancient symbols awakened one after another. The entire cliff trembled. Ice cracked. Massive sheets slid harmlessly aside. Behind them stood an entrance carved into the mountain itself. A forgotten sanctuary. No soldier spoke. No wolf moved. Even Cale felt as though he were standing before something sacred. Inside, time itself seemed frozen. Stone pillars reached toward a ceiling covered with glowing crystals. Ancient murals stretched across every wall. Not battles. Not victories. Families. Humans sitting beside wolves. Children laughing while giant silver wolves watched protectively. Queens walking through forests with entire packs surrounding them. Cale stared. This isn't the history we were taught. No, Vargos answered quietly. It is the history you were denied. They continued deeper until they reached a circular chamber. At its center stood a weathered marble statue. A woman. One hand rested upon the head of an enormous wolf. The other reached toward her people. She wore no crown, no jewels, only simple ceremonial robes. Lyra felt tears gathering before she understood why. Who is she? Vargos lowered his head. Our queen. Cale looked puzzled. There has never been a queen recorded before the founding king. Vargos slowly turned toward him. Because your history begins where the truth was buried. He looked at Lyra. Her name was Queen Alindra, the first ruler of Moonfall, the first bridge keeper, the woman who united wolves and humans. Lyra couldn't look away from the statue. She felt familiar, almost like looking at someone she should remember. Vargos continued. She believed power belonged to those who protected the weakest, not those who ruled through fear. He stepped toward another wall. A faded mural stretched across the stone. It showed 20 enormous wolves kneeling before Queen Alindra, exactly as they had knelt before Lyra. Cale's breath caught. This happened before. Many times. Lyra whispered. Why me? Vargos looked at her with deep sadness. Because when the world forgot compassion, your family never did. Torin suddenly called from another chamber. Your Majesty! Everyone hurried toward him. Hidden beneath layers of dust lay dozens of stone tablets. Most had been shattered deliberately, not by time, by weapons. Someone had tried to erase every record stored here. One tablet remained mostly intact. Cale carefully brushed away centuries of dust. Ancient runes slowly became visible. Lyra reached toward them. The symbols glowed beneath her fingertips. Words appeared in the common tongue as if the stone itself had awakened. When the wolves kneel once more, the kingdom shall face its greatest betrayal, not from the forgotten, but from those who claim to remember. Silence filled the sanctuary. Torin frowned. A prophecy? Vargos shook his head. No. A warning. A sharp whistle echoed outside. Then another. Torin immediately drew his sword. We're not alone. Before anyone could react, flaming arrows rained through the sanctuary entrance. Fire spread across ancient wooden beams preserved for centuries. Smoke filled the sacred chamber. The records! Lyra cried. Several wolves rushed forward, not to attack, but to shield the fragile tablets with their own massive bodies. Burning timber crashed around them. Cale grabbed one end of a collapsing stone shelf, while Torin pulled trapped scrolls free. Lyra and Vargos carried what they could toward the exit. Outside, dark figures disappeared between the snow-covered trees. They had never intended to kill them. They had come for one purpose: destroy the truth. The sanctuary survived, but barely. Half the priceless records were gone forever. Cale looked back at the burning entrance, his jaw tightening. This wasn't random. No, Vargos replied. They're afraid. Of what? The old wolf turned toward Lyra. They're afraid the kingdom will finally remember who it was, before fear became law. As the flames died behind them, Lyra noticed something hidden beneath the fallen statue's pedestal. A small silver pendant. When she picked it up, it opened by itself. Inside was a faded portrait. On one side stood Queen Alindra. On the other, a little girl with the same ash-brown hair, the same gray-blue eyes, and the same crescent-shaped birthmark behind her ear that Lyra had carried since birth. Before anyone could speak, Vargos whispered the words he had hoped and feared to say for 700 years. Welcome home, my queen! The journey back from the frozen sanctuary felt heavier than the climb toward it. No one spoke, not because there was nothing to say, because every answer they had uncovered had broken another piece of the world they thought they understood. Snow drifted quietly around them as the 20 guardian wolves moved through the forest without making a sound. Their enormous paws left deep prints that were almost immediately softened by falling snow, as if the mountain itself wished to hide them from unfriendly eyes. Lyra rode beside Cale in silence. The silver pendant rested against her chest beneath her cloak. It felt strangely warm, almost alive. Every few minutes, she found herself touching it without realizing. She still couldn't believe what Vargos had called her. My queen! No, that couldn't be true. She wasn't a queen. She wasn't even someone people greeted in the castle halls. She was simply Lyra. When the towers of Moonfall Dominion finally appeared through the snowfall, something immediately felt wrong. The city gates were closed. Hundreds of armed warriors stood upon the walls. Black banners, bearing the seal of the Royal Council, had replaced the royal standard. Torin's expression darkened. Those banners weren't flying this morning. Cale's horse slowed. They've moved faster than I expected. One of the guards on the wall shouted down. By order of the Royal Council, King Cale Draken is relieved of command until the threat of the guardian wolves has been eliminated. The words echoed across the frozen valley. Even the horses seemed to stop breathing. Torin stepped forward angrily. Have you all gone mad? The captain upon the wall looked ashamed. We are following the council's decree. There is no decree above the king. There is if the council declares the king compromised. Lady Selene appeared on the battlements. Elegant. Calm. Certain. My king. She smiled politely. You have been misled. Kale's voice remained level. You attempted to destroy the sanctuary. I protected the kingdom. You burned history. I burned dangerous lies. The smile never left her face. The people deserve certainty. They deserve the truth. The truth, Selene replied softly, is whatever keeps the kingdom standing. That night, Kale refused to force his way into his own city. Instead, they made camp beneath towering pines outside the walls. Word spread quickly. By sunset, villagers quietly slipped through hidden paths carrying blankets, bread, and firewood. No one announced their arrival. They simply came. An old shepherd placed a basket beside Lyra. My wife baked these. Lyra blinked. For us. For you. She looked surprised. We've never met. The old man smiled gently. No. But my grandson says the wolves let him pet their ears. He laughed quietly. Monsters don't usually do that. As darkness settled over the camp, more people arrived. Hunters, blacksmiths, widows, children. Not because they had chosen sides, because they had begun asking questions. That frightened the council more than armies ever could. Near one of the fires, Lyra moved quietly from person to person. A hunter with a broken wrist. A child suffering from winter fever. An elderly woman whose knees had swollen from the cold. She treated each one without asking where their loyalty belonged. Kale watched from a distance. Torin approached. She hasn't stopped working since we left the sanctuary. Kale nodded. Does she ever? I don't think she knows how. For a while they simply watched. A little boy wandered nervously toward one of the ancient wolves. His mother gasped. The wolf lowered his enormous head until his nose touched the child's mitten. The boy burst into laughter. Soon 3 more children surrounded the giant creature. The wolf patiently lay down in the snow, allowing them to climb onto his broad back. Kale smiled before he realized he was smiling. Torin noticed. You trust them now. Kale looked toward the fire where Lyra carefully wrapped another bandage. I trust her. Late that evening, Lyra finally sat down beside the largest fire. She looked exhausted. Vargos quietly approached. Without speaking, he lowered himself onto the snow beside her. His massive body blocked the icy wind. You should rest, he said. She stared into the flames. I don't know who I am anymore. You are still Lyra. What if everyone expects someone else? They already do. She looked at him. I disappoint people. You always believe that. It's true. Vargos slowly shook his great head. No. They disappoint themselves. You simply refuse to become what they expected. His words lingered in the silence. For the first time since the sanctuary, Lyra allowed herself to cry. Not loudly, just quietly. Years of loneliness slipping away one tear at a time. The old wolf didn't offer speeches. He simply remained beside her. Sometimes, presence healed more deeply than words. Far inside the castle, Lady Selene stood before the council. The people hesitate. One noble frowned. They're confused. They should be. Then why are villagers leaving the city? Because hope spreads faster than fear if left alone. She turned toward a large map of the kingdom. Send messages to every pack lord. What shall we tell them? The truth. One counselor hesitated. Or our version? Selene's eyes grew cold. There is only one version that keeps order. She pointed toward Lyra's name, written across the map. Announced that the Omega intends to seize the throne. Several nobles exchanged uneasy looks. But she has said nothing of the sort. She doesn't need to. People only need something to fear. By morning, the rumor had already outrun the sunrise. Across Moonfall Dominion, messengers carried the same story. The weak Omega has bewitched the king. The ancient wolves seek revenge. The throne is under attack. Pack leaders began gathering armies. Some declared loyalty to the council. Others demanded proof. Many chose to wait. The kingdom slowly split into invisible lines. Not between wolves and humans. Between those who feared change and those willing to question the past. That afternoon, scouts returned with troubling news. Torin entered Kale's tent without ceremony. There are armed patrols moving toward every mountain pass. Council soldiers? Not only. He spread a rough map across the table. 5 northern packs have pledged themselves to Selene. And the others? They're waiting. Kale studied the map. They're watching to see who strikes first. Vargos entered quietly. If blood is spilled now, the kingdom will remember only war. Lyra looked up. Then we cannot be the first to fight. Torin frowned. What if they attack? She met his eyes calmly. Then we protect, not conquer. Kale looked at her for a long moment. There it was again. The same instinct that had driven her to save a trapped wolf before opening the gate. She never asked, who deserves kindness? Only, who needs it? For the first time in years, Kale realized that leadership did not always begin with strength. Sometimes, it began with restraint. As night settled over the camp, a lone rider emerged from the forest carrying a white flag. He dismounted before Kale and knelt. A message from the council. Kale broke the royal seal. His expression hardened as he read. What is it? Torin asked. Kale handed the parchment to Lyra. Written in elegant black ink were only 2 sentences. Return the Omega before tomorrow's sunset, or the capital will execute every citizen suspected of aiding her. The camp fell silent. Across the clearing, the 20 guardian wolves slowly rose to their feet. Not in anger, in readiness. For the first time since leaving the Forbidden Gate, peace no longer seemed enough. As everyone struggled to absorb the council's ultimatum, one of the younger guardian wolves suddenly lifted his head toward the eastern forest. A low, warning growl rolled through the camp. Vargo's eyes narrowed. They're here. Not soldiers. Not assassins. Something older. Something that even the guardian wolves had not expected to awaken. The growl spread through the forest like distant thunder. One by one, all 20 guardian wolves lifted their heads toward the eastern trees. The camp instantly fell silent. Even the horses shifted nervously. Torin drew his sword. Positions! Royal soldiers rushed to form a protective line around the refugees who had gathered outside the capital. Mothers pulled children close, while hunters reached for bows that suddenly felt far too small. Lyra searched Vargo's face. He wasn't afraid. He was listening. What is it? She whispered. The old wolf's ears twitched. They've awakened. Who? For the first time since leaving the Forbidden Gate, a shadow crossed Vargo's ancient eyes. The Watchers. No one spoke. Even Kale had never heard the name. The Watchers, he repeated. Vargos nodded slowly. They were created long before your kingdom. Wolves. No, they were never alive. A cold breeze swept through the camp. They are guardians without hearts. They remember only commands. They do not know mercy. Lyra frowned. If they're guardians, what do they guard? Vargos looked toward the dark forest. Our greatest mistake. Branches cracked somewhere beyond the trees. Not the sound of an animal. Too heavy. Too deliberate. Then, 3 enormous figures emerged from the darkness. Gasps spread through the camp. They looked like wolves, if wolves had been carved from black stone. Each stood nearly twice the size of Vargos. Their bodies were covered in glowing cracks that pulsed like dying embers. Their eyes contained no emotion, only pale blue light. They stopped at the edge of the camp, watching, waiting. One of the children whimpered. The nearest stone wolf immediately turned its head toward the sound. Its body tensed. Without hesitation, Vargos stepped between the creature and the camp. The other 19 guardian wolves joined him. No growling, no challenge, just a silent wall of silver fur. The stone wolves did not advance. They simply stared. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they disappeared back into the forest, as if confirming something. Torin lowered his sword. They could have attacked. They weren't hunting, Vargos said quietly. They were searching. For what? The old wolf looked at Lyra. For you. The camp remained awake until dawn. No fires burned. No songs were sung. The silence itself felt watchful. As the first light touched the snow, Lyra found Vargos sitting alone beside the frozen river. She wrapped her cloak tighter against the cold. You knew they would come. Yes. Why didn't you tell us? He watched thin sheets of ice drift slowly downstream. Because I hoped. They had forgotten. She sat beside him. The river reflected the pale morning sky. For a long while neither spoke. Finally, Lyra asked the question that had lived in her heart since the gate opened. Why did you wait for me? Vargos closed his eyes. Not for you. He smiled gently. For someone like you. His voice became quieter, older. As the first kingdom grew stronger, so did human pride. They wanted power without responsibility. They wanted loyalty without kindness. They wanted wolves to obey, instead of choosing. Lyra listened without interrupting. Queen Alindra refused. She believed trust could never be commanded. When she died, everything changed. The council blamed us for every tragedy that followed. Kale, who had quietly approached behind them, remained hidden among the trees. He listened, not as a king, as a man searching for truth. Vargos continued. The new rulers feared that one day another bridge keeper would be born. So they erased every memory of Alindra. They rewrote songs. They burned books. They broke statues. They hunted every family carrying her blood. Lyra's fingers tightened around the silver pendant. My family. They survived. Barely. You became healers. You hid your name. You taught compassion. Because it could not be outlawed. Tears blurred Lyra's vision. My parents knew. They knew enough. They died protecting what little remained. Kale stepped forward. Then why seal yourselves behind the gate? Vargos turned toward him. Because the Watchers could never be destroyed. They obeyed only one command. What command? Protect the bridge keeper. Kale frowned. That doesn't sound evil. It wasn't. Until men changed the meaning. Vargos looked toward the eastern forest. They convinced the Watchers that no bridge keeper must ever exist again. Lyra felt the weight of the words. So if I had never opened the gate, you would have lived quietly, and the Watchers would have slept forever. And now, they believe the last bridge keeper has returned. Silence settled over the frozen river. The truth felt heavier than any weapon. Back at camp, something unexpected happened. A young refugee girl approached, one of the guardian wolves carrying a wooden bowl. Inside was warm stew. The enormous wolf lowered his head curiously. My mama says heroes should eat too. The wolf sniffed the bowl, then carefully nudged it back toward the child. The girl laughed. You don't like vegetables? Nearby, several adults smiled for the first time in days. Vargos watched quietly. Do you see? Kale nodded. The children never feared them. Children meet truth before prejudice. The king looked across the camp. Villagers were beginning to treat the guardian wolves less like legends and more like neighbors, not because anyone had convinced them, because the wolves had earned it, one quiet choice at a time. Much like Lyra. That evening, Kale called a meeting beneath the largest pine in the camp. Around the fire sat Torin, Lyra, Vargos, village elders, and representatives from several undecided packs who had secretly come to listen. Kale stood. I spent my life believing strength meant defending what I inherited. He looked toward Lyra. I was wrong. The gathering became perfectly still. A kingdom deserves more than inherited stories. It deserves the truth. One elder asked quietly, and if the truth destroys the kingdom? Kale shook his head. Then it was never the truth that threatened it. It was the lie. Several pack leaders lowered their eyes. The words struck deeper than any speech they had heard from a ruler. For the first time, the Alpha King had chosen justice over certainty. The meeting ended peacefully. Hope slowly returned to the camp. But far away, inside the abandoned frozen sanctuary, the cracked stone floor suddenly trembled. A deep, metallic sound echoed beneath the mountain. Hidden beneath the ruins, something enormous opened its eyes. Not one of the Watchers. Something far older. Something that had remained asleep, even when the forbidden gate opened. Just before midnight, one of Kale's scouts arrived at full speed, his horse covered in foam and frost. He nearly fell from the saddle. Your Majesty! He struggled to catch his breath. The capital! Torin grabbed his shoulders. What happened? The scout looked directly at Lyra. His face had gone completely pale. The council has captured the royal heir, and they're telling the kingdom you ordered it. The camp exploded into motion. What do you mean the royal heir was captured? Torin demanded. The exhausted scout struggled to breathe. There is no heir. The words hung in the air. Kale frowned. There has never been one. The scout nodded frantically. Exactly. The council has announced that the ancient wolves kidnapped a secret royal heir and that Lady Lyra intends to use the child to claim the throne. Silence fell. Then angry voices erupted across the camp. They're inventing children now. They've gone mad. They'll believe anything if it keeps people afraid. Cale's jaw tightened. No. He looked toward the lights of Moonfall Dominion, glowing beyond the snowy valley. They've become desperate. Vargos quietly rose to his feet. Desperate people are dangerous. By sunrise, the Foll story had spread across every pack in the kingdom. Bells rang from village to village. Messengers rode without rest. The council declared Lyra an enemy of the crown. A reward was offered for anyone who delivered her alive. Meanwhile, the people who had actually met Lyra struggled to reconcile the rumors with the woman they knew. An old hunter who had watched her treat wounded strangers shook his head. The girl who shared her last loaf of bread? She kidnapped a child. I don't believe it. A blacksmith nodded. Neither do I. Slowly, the lie began to fracture. Not because someone argued against it, because Lyra's actions no longer matched the story. Truth had quietly earned witnesses. Cale gathered the remaining loyal pack, lords, beneath a circle of frost-covered pines. Only 7 came. Weeks earlier, every one of them would have obeyed the council without question. Now, they looked uncertain. Cale stepped into the center. I won't ask for your loyalty. The leaders exchanged surprised glances. I ask only one thing. Come with me. See the truth with your own eyes. One gray-haired alpha folded his arms. And if we still believe the council afterward? Cale answered calmly. Then I will surrender my crown without resistance. The men stared at him. No king would make such an offer unless he believed the truth could stand on its own. One by one, they nodded. Before they left, Lyra found Vargos standing alone near the edge of the forest. He was watching the eastern horizon, where dark clouds gathered above the mountains. The Watchers, she asked. They're closer. You can feel them. I've always been able to. She hesitated. What if the council attacks while they're coming? Vargos looked at her. Then the kingdom will face 2 enemies. And we'll face both. Lyra lowered her eyes. I never wanted any of this. I know. I only wanted. She searched for the words. A place where no one felt alone. The old wolf smiled. That is exactly why you were chosen. The gates of Moonfall Dominion opened at noon. Not for an army. For a procession. Cale entered first. He wore no ceremonial armor. No royal cloak. Only the plain black uniform of a warrior. Behind him walked Lyra. The 20 guardian wolves followed in complete silence. No growls. No display of strength. Citizens lined the streets. Some stared in fear. Others watched with quiet hope. Children smiled openly. The little white wolf pup trotted happily beside Lyra, as though this were any ordinary walk through the city. People noticed. If monsters truly ruled these wolves, why did they move with such peace? Lady Selene waited inside the great hall. Every seat in the council chamber was filled. Pack lords from across the kingdom stood shoulder to shoulder. Nobles whispered behind jeweled masks. The tension felt heavy enough to crack stone. Selene rose gracefully. Your Majesty. Her smile never reached her eyes. You return with remarkable confidence. Cale stopped at the center of the chamber. I return with evidence. She laughed softly. Evidence. You burned most of it. I protected the kingdom. No. Cale's voice echoed through the hall. You protected your version of it. He placed the weathered royal journal upon the council table. Gasps spread through the room. The journal of King Aldrin? Selene's expression changed for the first time. Only slightly. You found it. I found what remained. She folded her hands. A torn journal proves nothing. Cale nodded. Agreed. He turned toward the great doors. Bring them in. The doors slowly opened. Not soldiers. Not nobles. The village children entered first. The little girl who had fed stew to one of the guardian wolves walked beside the enormous silver guardian. Then came farmers, hunters, healers, blacksmiths, ordinary people. Each stepped forward willingly. One by one they spoke. He saved my son. She healed my wife. They guarded our village. They never harmed anyone. The wolves protected us from an avalanche. They carried injured strangers through the snow. Each testimony chipped away at the wall of fear. Selene remained composed. A clever performance. Then Vargos entered. The hall became completely silent. The ancient wolf walked directly to the throne. He looked at the carved symbols beneath it, then slowly raised one enormous paw. He pressed it against an ancient engraving almost hidden beneath centuries of polish. A deep rumble echoed beneath the castle. Golden light spread across the floor. Ancient runes awakened. No one had seen them for 700 years. The entire throne room began changing before their eyes. Paint peeled away. Stone shifted. Hidden carvings emerged from beneath newer masonry. Murals appeared. The first queen, 20 guardian wolves, humans, and wolves standing together beneath the moon. Not enemies. Family. Celine took one involuntary step backward. No! The oldest counselor stared at the walls in horror. The throne! It was never built for conquest. Vargo's voice rolled through the chamber. It was built for guardians. Lyra slowly walked toward the restored mural. She reached out. Her fingertips brushed the image of Queen Elindra. The silver pendant around her neck began glowing softly. Not with power, with recognition. A hidden compartment opened beneath the mural. Inside rested a sealed scroll. Its wax carried the crest of the first queen. Cale carefully broke the seal. He read silently. His hands began trembling. Torin frowned. What does it say? Cale looked up. His voice was barely above a whisper. It names every family that protected the truth. He turned another page. And every family that betrayed it. The room froze. The final name on the second list was written larger than all the others. House Celine. Lady Celine closed her eyes. For the first time, she stopped pretending. I did it. The confession echoed across the chamber. Several nobles gasped. She slowly removed the jeweled chain marking her office as High Chancellor. My ancestors erased the first queen. They believed unity would destroy Alpha rule. They believed fear created stronger kingdoms. She looked toward Lyra. And for centuries, fear worked. Lyra met her gaze. Quietly, without hatred. Did it? Celine looked around the chamber. At the frightened nobles. At the divided packs. At the lonely throne. Slowly, her shoulders fell. No. Before anyone could speak again, a deafening roar shook the castle. The stained-glass windows exploded inward. The entire hall trembled. Far beyond the city walls, 20 enormous shapes of black stone emerged from the eastern mountains. The Watchers had arrived. This time, they were not searching. They were coming for the last bridge keeper. As panic swept through Moonfall Dominion, the guardian wolves silently formed a circle around Lyra one final time. Vargos looked at Cale, then at Lyra. The promise we made 700 years ago ends today. Outside, the first Watcher crossed the frozen river, and the earth itself began to shake. The roar rolled across Moonfall Dominion like an avalanche. Every window in the great hall rattled. Dust drifted from the ancient stone ceiling. Outside, the city bells began ringing, not in celebration but in warning. The Watchers had come. People poured into the streets, searching the eastern horizon. Beyond the frozen river, 20 colossal figures of black stone marched through the snow. Each step cracked the frozen earth. Each movement felt slow, inevitable, unstoppable. Children cried. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Warriors rushed to the city walls. For the first time in generations, Moonfall Dominion looked exactly as the old stories had described it. A kingdom standing at the edge of its final battle. Torin reached for his sword. Archers to the walls. Captain after captain repeated the command. Thousands of bows were raised. Thousands of arrows waited. Cale lifted his hand. No. Torin stared at him. If we wait, they'll reach the gates. They're not our enemy. They're marching on the city. Cale's voice remained calm. They're marching toward one person. Every eye turned toward Lyra. She felt the weight of the kingdom settle upon her shoulders. Not as a burden, as a choice. Vargos stepped beside her. The Watchers obey only one command. Protect the bridge, Keeper. Lyra whispered. By making sure no bridge keeper ever lives. The old wolf nodded. They cannot question. They cannot forgive. They cannot choose. She looked at the frightened faces filling the great hall. If they enter the city, thousands will die. Vargos closed his eyes. Yes. Silence followed. Then Lyra quietly removed the silver pendant from around her neck. Cale frowned. What are you doing? They came for me. I won't let them find everyone else first. You cannot face them alone. She smiled sadly. I won't be alone. She looked toward the 20 guardian wolves. Every one of them had already risen, waiting, just as they had waited 700 years before the Forbidden Gate. The eastern gates slowly opened. Snow drifted through the entrance. Lyra walked out first. No armor, no weapon, only a simple gray cloak fluttering in the winter wind. Behind her came Vargos, then the other 19 guardian wolves. Finally, Kale stepped forward. Torin caught his arm. Your Majesty. Kale gently removed his hand. A king walks beside his people. He took his place beside Lyra. Not in front of her, not behind her, beside her. The citizens watched from the walls in stunned silence. The two groups met upon the frozen river. Only a few hundred feet separated them. The largest watcher stopped. Its body towered above everyone present. Cracks of pale blue light spread across its stone chest. Its voice sounded like mountains grinding together. Bridge keeper identified. Primary directive. Eliminate. The watchers advanced. The guardian wolf stepped forward. For the first time, 700 years of waiting reached its end. Yet Vargos never attacked. Instead, he bowed his head. The other 19 wolves did the same. Lyra stared. What are you doing? Vargos smiled. The last promise. Before she could stop him, he looked toward the watchers. We release you. The enormous stone creatures hesitated. For the first time, their perfect movements faltered. Lyra suddenly understood. They've never been released. Vargos nodded. They've only ever been obeyed. She stepped forward, close enough to touch the nearest watcher. Kale instinctively reached toward her. She gently squeezed his hand once, then continued, the watcher's glowing eyes fixed upon her. Its stone claws slowly lifted. Around the kingdom, thousands held their breath. Lyra placed one hand against the cold stone. The blue light beneath its surface flickered. I know why you were created. The watcher remained motionless. You were made to protect, not destroy, not rule. Protect. You've been carrying the wrong command for 700 years. Silence. Snowflakes landed softly upon ancient stone. You can stop now. Nothing happened. Several soldiers lowered their heads. Some began to cry. Then, a single crack spread across the watcher's chest. Not from damage, from light, warm silver light, the same gentle glow that had awakened the Forbidden Gate. The blue faded. Another crack appeared, then another. Across all 20 watchers, their stone bodies trembled. Their ancient command was breaking. The largest watcher slowly lowered itself onto one knee. Its voice no longer sounded empty. It sounded tired. Original command. Long silence followed. Then, restored. Behind it, the remaining watchers did the same. 20 stone guardians knelt before Lyra. Not because she had defeated them, because she had reminded them who they had always been. The mountain wind carried a deep sigh. One by one, the stone bodies began dissolving into silver dust. Not dying. Finally, at peace, the frozen river became quiet again. No battle had been fought. No blood had stained the snow. The greatest victory in Moonfall history had been won without a single sword. Vargos looked toward the sky. The promise is fulfilled. His voice was almost a whisper. Lyra turned. What do you mean? He smiled. For 700 years. We remained because we believed you would come. She shook her head. I still need you. You never needed us. You needed to believe what we already knew. The silver fur around Vargos slowly began glowing. The other guardian wolves looked toward him, then toward Lyra, one after another. They bowed, not to a queen, to the girl who had never stopped choosing kindness when no one was watching. Their bodies slowly dissolved into thousands of silver lights that drifted upward like snow caught in moonlight. The little white wolf pup whined softly. Vargos touched his nose to Lyra's forehead one final time. You were never the weakest Omega. You were simply the first person strong enough to open a gate no one else could. Then he was gone. Weeks later, spring arrived. For the first time in many years, children played beside the eastern river without fear. The Forbidden Gate remained where it had always stood, but its chains had been removed. Flowers now grew between the ancient stones. The great hall looked different too. The restored murals of Queen Alindra and the guardian wolves remained uncovered for all to see. The royal council no longer ruled through bloodline alone. Pack leaders, healers, hunters, craftsmen, and for the first time in history, Omegas all held equal seats, not as a gift, as a right. One quiet evening, Kale found Lyra standing beneath the old oak tree in the castle gardens, the same place where frightened children had once met the ancient wolves. He stood beside her. Neither spoke for a while. Finally he smiled. "I've been thinking." "That usually worries me," Lyra teased. He laughed softly, his first real laugh in years. "I spent my whole life believing a crown made someone worthy of leading." He looked at her. "You taught me something different." She raised an eyebrow. "What was that?" "People don't follow the strongest. They follow the one who makes them feel safe." Silence settled between them. Comfortable. Warm. Without ceremony, Kale held out his hand. Not a royal command. Not a proposal demanded by politics. Simply, a choice. Lyra looked at his hand. Then at the kingdom beyond the castle walls. The people were laughing again. Children chased one another through the gardens. Life had returned. She placed her hand in his. "I'd like to build the future with you." Kale smiled. "So would I." Above them, a white wolf crossed the distant mountain ridge, paused for a single heartbeat, and looked back toward Moonfall Dominion. Then it disappeared into the endless forest. Perhaps it was only another wolf. Or perhaps some promises never truly end. The weakest hearts are often the ones strong enough to carry the greatest hope. And sometimes the gates that change the world do not open with power, but with compassion.